Can you walk us through the genesis of the Chicago Climate Exchange?
There was a UN meeting in Glen Cove, New York in 1995. I think Paula ended up going there representing Jacques Cousteau, and I went there as a representative of UNCTAD, who couldn't send somebody, so I was the designated person, and there was a round table, and I proposed, just threw it out there in the air, that the only way, in my experience, that you would know if a market could be used was to try it. I felt my presentation went over like a lump of coal. It just sank to the depth of the ocean. I thought it was an epiphany, and nobody else thought it was anything except I finish and I get off the stage, and there's Paula, all enthusiastic and saying, that was a great talk. And boy, let's stay in touch. I'm Paula DiPerna. I'm with Jacques Cousteau. And I thought, oh, at least there was somebody there. I felt very lonely. I mean, it was one presentation after the other, and there was just absolutely no response. I thought that I would continue to work with a guy by the name of Maurice Strong, who Paula and I both knew. He convened the Rio Summit, and he ultimately hired us to help commoditize a Costa Rican forest. And he suggested, oh, nothing's happening, and you ought to work on a global emissions trading. So we drew up some facts. Comes 97, and Kyoto occurs, and trading gets implemented into the Kyoto protocols as a tool, a policy tool. And it was gabbled in at 3 o'clock in the morning. Gore was very, very prevalent. Fast forward, we started working on the feasibility of getting a market going and underlying terms, and raise some angel capital. But most importantly, Paula ended up as chairman of the Joyce Foundation, and the phone rang in early July, and the voice on the other said, "Hi, it's Paula. I just became president of the Joyce Foundation. You want to have lunch at the University Club?"
Richard had said, we need to try it in 95. It rang a bell with me. I went on with my life. He went on with his life. But as soon as I got to Chicago, which was literally July 1, I called him. And we had lunch at July 14th at the University Club. In 2 hours, and this is to Richard's credit, he just sketched it out because, at least then you couldn't think of having any papers on the table or making any kind of notes. So and this is described in the book because I'll never forget it. My chair was looking out at the lake and Richard's looking at me, and he's kind of like explaining what eventually was indeed the final architecture, how you get the latent demand to come alive, how the regulatory incentives, the companies are probably looking for something to clarify and standardize what they expect to happen to them. Inertia is prevalent, and the only way to break out of it is to move quickly on something that no one else has ever heard of.
In that conversation, we envisioned the market architecture for the Chicago Climate Exchange. Paula said to me, look, the foundation really is oriented towards the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes region. So, Richard, can you design something that's meaningful for this sector? And that became the basis for a study which showed that the upper Midwest had an economy the size of Germany, that there was enough combination of GDP, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, a group of industrial users and polluters that would provide a large enough base to make a market go if we targeted the Great Lakes states, which was the franchise for the Joyce Foundation to look at that, but was only the beginning. And to further that same thing, Paula now had to go convince her board that this was a project worthwhile for the foundation to pursue.
Richard was the real thing when it came to economics and market development. We had Senator Obama then, Senator Barack Obama, on the board, and he bought in to this. He understood the thing. I was able to get it across the line also because I had initiated and interested the board in doing what we called Millennium Grants. And I believe if you go on the Joyce Foundation now, in the timeline of their major milestones as philanthropists, you will see the Millennium Grants as one of their milestones. And the idea of those grants, it was 2000, the idea of those grants was to invest in three kinds of things that would have intergenerational significance. One, to look at our current grantees and see which among them we wanted to make a big bet on. Who could we jump up to another level to give them an intergenerational impact? The second category was kind of the opposite. Which things do we want to reinforce? Which things have happened in the past that are in danger of slipping away that we want to give a fresh start to? And the third category was something entirely new that would have intergenerational significance. And so the idea of something wasn't quite called yet the Chicago Climate Exchange, but building on the Midwest, and it had all the economic dynamics that a market would require. It had pollution, it had offsets, it had everything, and fit in the Joyce Foundation mandate, but had global and intergenerational significance. It was kind of a very good fit, and it was very much enthusiastically supported. And I think finally, in the end, getting commercial support and commercial participation and members and all the things, getting regulatory frameworks behind us. Partly, we could say, and thanks to the board of the Joyce Foundation then, that public purpose imprimatur, that having a philanthropic underpinning provided, enabled people to believe in this, that it wasn't just something coming out of commercialism. It had a real global purpose, public purpose. So I'll never be able to thank them enough for that, and probably neither will anybody else in the world.
Building a market is really developing a complex mixture of economics and philanthropy, the law, accounting, technology, open ears, people who are willing to change, to participate in pilot efforts. And all of this is a part of that story. Paula said to me, look, we can't give you, Richard, a grant because you're a for-profit organization. So I went to Don Jacobs at Northwestern and I said, Don, I have a problem. Can you help? And Don said, sure, you've taught here before. I'll make you a research professor. I will serve, Northwestern will serve as the recipient and we'll administer it to you. We will keep our overhead charges at very low levels relative to other grants because of this. And then now Joyce was partnering with Northwestern University, so that was an imprimatur that also was important in attracting people. And we had then begun to think of this thing as the Chicago Climate Exchange and started to get an advisory group. And Don Jacobs, the dean at Kellogg, joined it. That's a prestigious name. We asked Richie Daley, who wanted to re-beautify and was beautifying Michigan Avenue, if he'd be the chair. And he said in a quip, John, you'll appreciate it, he said, how couldn't I become chairman of an exchange called the Chicago Climate Exchange? So he became the honorary chairman, and part of the architecture was now it was beginning to fall into place with Paula as president of one of the major foundations, the board approving it with members like Senator Barack Obama, Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, one of the top 5 in the country, being the administrator, Don Jacobs being on the advisory committee. So you were beginning to see the thing in formation.